Well, there are two main types of institutions. There are the formal institutions and there are the informal institutions. So we are saying there are formal rules and informal rules. Examples of formal institutions may include the formal laws passed by a country's parliament. It's a formal institution. It may also include the formal laws enshrined in a country's constitution. So constitution is an example of formal institution. Example of a formal institution again may include separation of powers. Separation of powers that says that formally there should be a division of work between the three arms of government into, if you like, watertight compartments, so that as far as personnel and functions are concerned, each becomes separated and independent from the other. It's a formal rule or formal institution. So that's by way of formal institution. But we also have informal institutions. Informal institutions are, like you say, informal rules, and they include customs, they include conventions, they include patron-client relations, they include tribal relations, they include spousal relations, they include old boyism, old student association. So customs and conventions may not be formally written down, but they are long-standing norms that serves to regulate how things are done. If you say patron-client relations as formal, informal, example of informal institutions, it's an example of how politicians relate. Politicians referred to as the patrons relate with their supporters, being the clients, how they relate with themselves. The clients support the politician to win elections, and once election or power is won, the patron, being the politicians, owe it a duty to satisfy certain demands and needs of their clients. As patron-clients relations, it's informal, it's not documented, but it's something that is there. You can talk about ethnic relations, the relationship between people on ethnic grounds, that also serves as a certain rule to influence certain things and certain favors for people of for the benefit of people of the same ethnic group. The relationship with spousal relations. Spousal relations, there's nothing in Ghana. We have the office of the First Lady, office of the wife of the president. It is not formally provided for in the constitution. It's an informal institution, yet it plays a dominant role in shaping the decisions that the president would make. And so, but it's not a formal institution. Then you have old student association, old boyism. Okay, the fact that we attended the same school when we meet, it influences me or it influences you to act in a certain way. It becomes a certain rule that because we attended the same school, when we meet, if there are favors that you are looking for from me, I'm looking for from you, we quickly would mention the old relationship, old boyism, or old student relationship that we've had. We begin to talk about how we used to play football at school, how we used to fare, how we used to study together and all that. And that kind of narration brings a certain affinity among people, and it serves as a certain informal rule that influence how things would have to be done. So there are formal institutions and there are informal institutions, and oftentimes we tend to ask ourselves, which of these types of institutions serves to influence decision making? And it appears that in many developing countries of Africa, in many developing countries in the world, and for that matter, if you want to look at Ghana, for instance, sometimes the informal structures and informal institutions tend to influence how things are done more than the formal institutions. It is part of the reasons why we are where we are as a developing country, where we tend to look at the formal institutions, formal laws, and blink or close our eyes to them, and we look at the informal relations and whom you know, spousal relations, ethnic relations, patron-client relations, that compels us to take certain decisions, in the interest or on behalf, or certain decisions that promote the interest of others, as against being influenced by the formal structures of formal institutions. So developing countries would be better served in their quest to bring about development if they cut down on the influences on decision making by norms, by informal relations, by informal institutions, by patron-client relations, and all other things that are informal. But we tend to give more preference to them than the formal structures. But sometimes, in the quest to get things done quickly, sometimes the formal institutions or formal structures may also not work. They may prove to be overly bureaucratic and plague processes or decision making with needless bottlenecks, and so then people may want to resort to informal institutions just for the purposes of expediting things. They have two sides. Formal institutions have their strengths, they have their merits, they have their critique. Informal institutions have where they work well, and then they have their strengths. But I want to believe that in our quest to bring about development in a nation like Ghana, yes, we should stick to the formal institutions, but sometimes if it becomes necessary for us to also look at other informal conventions, we look at them. But let's not place too much focus or emphasis on the informal structures and informal institutions whom you know, and those kind of informal relations, because sometimes they pervert the formal rules and they do not allow equity and fairness in dealing with people. Thank you.